They exiled him twice, the same king, the same man, twice, and both times Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar walked out of Castile with almost nothing, no land, no title, no army worth mentioning, and came back stronger than when he left. The first time he built a reputation that terrified half the peninsula. The second time he built a kingdom. Nobody ever learned the lesson. Maybe that's the most remarkable part. Drawn from history. He was born in 1043 near Burgos, not into royalty, not into wealth, just into a family of minor Castilian knights who understood that the only currency that mattered in their world was what you could do on a battlefield. His father died and left him modest lands and a name that meant nothing yet. What he had instead was instinct, the kind that can't be taught and can't be bought. The ability to read a situation faster than anyone else in the room, to see 3 moves ahead while everyone around him was still reacting to the last one. Prince Sancho of Castile saw it immediately. He took Rodrigo into his personal retinue, trained him, used him, and then watched him become the most feared knight on the peninsula. Rodrigo didn't just fight. He studied. He prepared. He chose terrain. He waited when everyone else was charging. He struck when everyone else thought the moment had passed. At the Battle of Golpejera, with the Castilian army in retreat, the campaign apparently lost, it was Rodrigo who turned to Sancho and said, "Go back." The Leonese were celebrating. Their guard was down. "Hit them now." Sancho hit them. King Alfonso of Leon was captured. Castile won everything. The soldiers called him Campeador, master of the battlefield. Then Sancho was killed during a siege, and Alfonso, the man Rodrigo had just captured and exiled, came home to inherit everything, including Rodrigo. Alfonso was shrewd enough to keep him. You don't throw away the best sword in the kingdom just because you're angry at the hand that held it. He gave Rodrigo a prestigious marriage, some formal honors, and a place at court. What he didn't give him was trust. That belonged to someone else. A knight named Garcia Ordóñez, the Count of Nájera, who understood that the easiest path to the top was making sure someone else couldn't climb it. For years, Rodrigo performed. He won battles. He collected tributes. He did everything a loyal knight was supposed to do. In 1079, sent to the Taifa of Seville to collect tribute on Alfonso's behalf. He found himself in the middle of a war between 2 Muslim city-states, and the Count of Nájera fighting on the other side. Rodrigo won, decisively. He captured his rival personally on the battlefield. That should have been the end of it. Rodrigo had done his job, won his fight, and delivered his king's tribute. Instead, the Count, once released, went straight to Alfonso and whispered that Rodrigo had stolen part of the money for himself. There was no proof. There was no investigation. There was only Alfonso and a court full of men who had spent years resenting someone they couldn't outfight. He was exiled. His lands were taken. He rode out of Castile with a handful of loyal knights and the clothes on his back, and the court that had watched him win battle after battle for 20 years let him go. Here is where the story of most men ends. Rodrigo hadn't even started. He went east, to Zaragoza, to the court of a Muslim emir named Al-Mu'taman, who had the rare quality of recognizing talent without caring where it came from. Rodrigo became Al-Mu'taman's commander. Let that settle for a moment. The greatest Christian knight of his generation, exiled by a Christian king, rebuilding his reputation in the service of a Muslim ruler. The same man who had fought under Castilian banners was now defending Zaragoza against the King of Aragon, the Count of Barcelona, and various other enemies who found the arrangement deeply offensive. None of their offense stopped them from losing to him. At Almanar, the Count of Barcelona came with a coalition force to crush Zaragoza. He was so confident in his numbers that when Al-Mu'taman's men offered payment to avoid the battle, he refused and mocked Rodrigo's chances out loud. The Count spent the next several weeks as Rodrigo's prisoner. That was the pattern. Over and over. Men who underestimated Rodrigo, who assumed that exile meant defeat, who looked at his modest force and saw weakness. They would find themselves sitting in his camp, negotiating their ransom, wondering what had just happened. 4 years passed. Rodrigo won every engagement, rebuilt his reputation from scratch, this time without a crown behind him, without a kingdom's resources, without anything except the men who had followed him out of Castile, and the mind that had never stopped working. Alfonso called him back. The Almoravids, a ferocious Berber force from North Africa, united under religious discipline, the most dangerous military power the peninsula had seen in generations, had arrived and destroyed Alfonso's army at the Battle of Sagrayas. Suddenly, Alfonso needed every capable commander he had, including the one he'd thrown away. Rodrigo returned, fought, won. Alfonso exiled him again. This time was worse. His lands were seized completely. His wife Jimena and his children were imprisoned. Everything he had managed to rebuild, the property, the position, the life he had reconstructed after the first exile, taken again by the same king, for political reasons that had nothing to do with his performance and everything to do with the jealousy of men who couldn't beat him any other way. Rodrigo rode east, again, and if Alfonso thought this would break him, if he expected the second exile to produce the same result as the first, a wounded knight rebuilding in someone else's service and waiting for recall, he fundamentally misunderstood the man he kept throwing away. This time, Rodrigo wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to come back. He was going to build something of his own, Valencia, the richest city on the Mediterranean coast. Wealthy from trade, strategically vital, politically fractured, a prize that everyone wanted and no one could hold. Rodrigo didn't storm it. That was never how he operated. He moved through the surrounding territory first, took the roads, cut the trade routes, controlled the water. He didn't attack Valencia's walls. He made the walls irrelevant, slowly squeezing the city until it couldn't breathe without his permission. Months of patience, months of discipline, months of holding his force together through sheer force of will while the city slowly ran out of options. On June 15th, 1094, the gates opened. Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, the twice-exiled knight, the man Alfonso had discarded twice, walked into one of the most valuable cities on the peninsula as its lord, not as a representative, not as a vassal, not in anyone else's name, his own. The Almoravids came immediately, the same force that had shattered Alfonso's armies, battle-hardened, numerically superior, and absolutely committed to taking Valencia back. They camped outside the walls and spent 10 days demonstrating their power. War cries, arrow volleys, constant pressure designed to break the garrison's nerve before the real assault began. Rodrigo watched. He waited. On the 10th night, he led his main force out through a lesser gate in complete silence and positioned them at the rear of the Almoravid camp. At dawn, a small decoy force exited through the western gate, visible, intentionally conspicuous, drawing the Almoravid vanguard forward. The moment they moved, Rodrigo hit them from behind. The rout was complete. The Almoravids fled. The siege collapsed. It was the first defeat the Almoravids had suffered since landing on the peninsula. Alfonso, with all his armies and all his resources, had lost to these men at Sagrayas. Rodrigo, with a force he had built himself from exile, destroyed them at Valencia. The comparison was not lost on anyone watching. He ruled Valencia for 5 years. He governed with the same pragmatism that had defined his entire career, not driven by ideology, not interested in imposing religious uniformity, focused entirely on what actually worked. Christians worshipped, Muslims paid tribute and kept their mosques. Trade continued. The city functioned. People who had lived under constant instability discovered something they hadn't expected from the man the Christian kings had twice thrown away. People expected revenge. They expected purges, executions, and the settling of old scores. Instead, Rodrigo did what he had always done. He built. While kings fought over crowns and borders, he built something far more difficult to create. A city that worked. When the Almoravids returned in force, he beat them again. When local rivals tested him, he crushed them. When the city needed to be held, he held it. Everything that needed doing, Rodrigo did it. He died in 1099, not in battle, of old age and accumulated campaign fatigue, in the city he had built. His widow Jimena held Valencia for 3 more years. Then Alfonso came, not to help, to evacuate. He decided the city was indefensible and ordered it burned. rather than allow it to fall into enemy hands. The city that Rodrigo had taken without burning a stone was set on fire by the king who had exiled him twice and benefited from his victories his entire life. Jimena carried his body back to Castile. He was buried at the monastery of San Pedro de Cardeña. The legend started almost immediately. They turned him into the perfect Christian crusader, pure, loyal, fighting for faith. They left out the Muslim emirs he had served, the mercenary years, the fact that he had fought against Christian armies as often as he had fought alongside them. They sanitized him because the real story was too complicated for simple myth. But the real story is better. A man of modest birth who built his reputation through talent alone, who was betrayed by the king he had served faithfully, who went into exile with nothing and rebuilt himself twice, who ended up ruling a city that the most powerful men on the peninsula had failed to hold. They had crowns. They had dynasties. They had armies funded by kingdoms. Rodrigo had been given nothing but what he could earn with his own mind, his own will, and his own refusal to accept that exile meant the end. Alfonso exiled him twice. Rodrigo came back twice, and the second time, he didn't come back to serve. He came back to rule. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe and leave a like. You can also write in the comments which historical topics you'd like to see next. See you in the next video.